Joe is the code name for America's daring, highly trained Special Mission Force. Its purpose, to defend human freedom against Cobra, a ruthless terrorist organization determined to rule the world.
Welcome back to Retro Wednesday at the Titanium Hangar. This is Mike, and today I'm starting a series of videos from 1982 to 1994. Every single vintage G.I. Joe figure made, and the vehicles. The vehicles I have, I can show in person. The vehicles I don't, I'll have to be a picture. I am not going to be so into all the sub teams. I have most of the sub teams, but I will show all of the sub teams and everything that's going on. I will lean really hard on the yojo.com site for accessories, dates, and any help that I need there. If there's a question about what date something was released, I will go with the yojo.com just because it makes it more simplistic. But we're going to start with 1982. The year it all began. And if you watched my video last week, then you know I had some negative thoughts about some of these figures, 10 of these figures that were released. And I got that out last week. Now I can be positive, point out the positives of this great toy line. The greatest action figure toy line ever made in history, and probably the greatest that ever will be made. But we'll talk about this, the entire 13-year run of G.I. Joe, starting now and coming up. All right, starting out, we're going to talk about Breaker, but before we get into that, I want to talk about comments I get from people talking about how this first year or the entire G.I. Joe line is groundbreaking. And I will say, yes, there are a lot of things about it that are groundbreaking, but the build of the figure is not groundbreaking. Mego's doing this on 3 different toy lines prior to G.I. Joe releasing their figures. Now, there's discussion out there that Mego licensed the body type out, and I don't see any evidence of that, but I'm not really worried about it, and I'm definitely not taking that away from G.I. Joe, because G.I. Joe quickly switched up to swivel arms. But as you can see, all of these are late 70s, early 80s, from 79 to 80, and there's even more with the black hole and some other stuff, but they are straight arms, and these are straight arms. But the very next year, G.I. Joe switched to swivel arms in 83. All right, this is Breaker, and out of the first 10 figures that were just kind of wearing sort of a plain military drab kind of garb, this is the one that most people probably like the most, either this one or Rock and Roll, mostly because he was in a lot of the episodes. And as being the first year figure, you got to think about it, there wasn't very much, well, any cartoon, there wasn't really media for this, and it was able to stand on its own for the most part. And this is one of the figures people like the most. I was always kind of intrigued by his headset. I thought it was kind of cool how it clipped on there, and although it wasn't a wire, it was actually just a really thin piece of plastic that, as you can see, develops a stress mark over time, and it clips into his backpack. Very simple, very simplistic. They were hitting a very low price point, and of course, this does have some paint apps, as in the front and on his face, on his head, and then a little bit on his boots, and not a lot. There's not a ton of paint apps, a little on the side here, but a pretty good looking figure overall, and very simplistic overall, but just enough paint apps to make it look interesting. Breaker, one that most people are going to love. All right, next up we're going to take a look at Flash, and Flash I think is one of the more interesting of the 10 in the military looking green, and I've got to say the padding that's on him does make him look a little bit more interesting overall. So he did get more paint apps applied to him, which made him look pretty cool. He does come with his backpack there. I might even have it on wrong. I probably do have it on wrong. And this laser flamethrower thing that he's got is kind of interesting too. It's kind of cool. They did include the backpack and the flamethrower laser gun that he has in the accessory pack, but it was differently colored. This was tan, and then this was kind of like a light gray instead of like a dark charcoal or a black. But one thing that I like about him, and this is something that I think is pretty cool because I didn't really have these on my original set of figures because they seem to all get lost. That's the little visor. It's a clear visor that does add an interesting look to him. He does have what appears to be maybe fireproof type of gloves that are on him. So a pretty interesting look overall. But I will say this, if you can't find these visors and you lose them, it's really cool that accessory pack number 1 that we'll see next year, or next week technically, has those in it. So they did put those out in an accessory pack, and that is why accessory pack number 1 is so highly sought after. Next up, we've got Grunt, and Grunt is throwing up a classic Yo Joe over there. Grunt is a very simplistic figure, and Grunt is a character, but Grunt is also considered by many a troop builder. Like, you would want just a bunch of standard Grunts out there with the backpack and his gun, and there's his gun, and going Yo Joe. Now, I actually have 2 versions of this gun that are slightly different, but they both look exactly like Yo Joe showed. And I'm going to trust the one that came from a seller, a very reputable local seller that knows his stuff about Joe. And I'm just going to trust old Charles there on that one. But here is the helmet that looks pretty cool. And a good looking figure overall for the fact that he's just a basic trooper that's out there. And past that, you're going to see a lot of reuse on this. I mean, we can see the reuse from Breaker on the chest, but then some different paint and a slightly different color variation. So they did that to keep the cost down in the first year, but they also did repaints down the road, which I will show. But this is Grunt, and he comes with a light tan, or light green helmet. He has a light tan one down the road. Next up is Rock and Roll, and Rock and Roll seems to be a fan favorite. Now, I am going to get into the fact that I'm showing straight arms and I'm showing figures that are the swivel arm. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I do not personally care about the straight arms. I don't pay extra for it. I don't really care. So my straight arms, some of them aren't in the greatest condition. I will not pay a premium, as I prefer the swivel arms. So that's just kind of where I'm at with that. But I want to throw that out there. The swivel arms are a little bit easier to pose, and they did put them back out next year, or the 1983, and I won't recover them. So if a figure comes out and it's just carried over, it's not going to be considered part of that year to me. Now, anyway, Rock and Roll is kind of cool because, of course, he is an interesting character. But he does have this big gun. He does have a bipod that's very easily lost, and it falls off real easy. So that's kind of a problem there. And he's a huge, huge, long gun. Looks like something that would be out of Star Wars, to tell you the truth. And then he's a darker green, so he has the darker green helmet, and that's just kind of how that goes with the figure. He shows his ammo belts that are strapped over his back and his chest, and that's just such a classic look of him. They kind of carry that forward in several of his future versions, and he does have many future versions. We're going to see him again many, many times in the next 12 years of G.I. Joe, but there it is, Rock and Roll. Next up, we have Scarlet, and she's the first of many female figures in the toy line. And as I've said before, and I'm going to say it again, is that I really do prefer the swivel arms over the straight arms. Now, my swivel arm did not fade as bad as the straight arm version did on her, and the fact that the crotch seems to crack a lot easier on the first version than on the second. I do prefer the second, so we're going to pull her out of the way and just go with the swivel arm one going forward. Now, there's a couple of issues with the figure, but I'm going to praise the fact that we got a female character in the first year of G.I. Joe, and that's awesome. And many more female characters in the future, which are some of the fan favorite characters. But the problem is, to make a female character, she is smaller, and her legs, her feet are smaller. She doesn't have holes in the feet for the stands. And with that, she is, out of all my figures on the display, the one that falls down the most. Well, technically the first version is the one that falls down the most, but the thing is that she doesn't have the holes in there. But she does come with this crossbow that she uses in the show, and that is really awesome. Her color scheme is actually really good. It's a cool looking color scheme, matches the show. I'm not exactly sure what she's got latched on to the back there, but she does have quite a few paint apps, and her color breakup does make her look very interesting. In fact, her color breakup makes her look interesting than the first 10 that are in the military garb. very sought after figure. And since I was late to collecting G.I. Joe when I was a kid, I had to hunt her down. It took hundreds of garage sales till I finally found her. But I found her. Scarlet. Next up we have Zap, and I've got to say that the one thing I like about Zap is that he's a slightly different green. So he stands out from the rest of them, just like Steeler is a slightly different green. Still not the same as Zap. And so with that, he stands out. The downside is, although he's reusing parts from other figures, his parts are not swappable because of the fact that his green is so different. But I do want to point out the straight arm. Mine is in really rough shape. And I have a few other straight arms that I'm not even going to show because they're in pretty rough shape. So this is probably the roughest I'm going to show on camera. And I don't put a premium on them as I get them for I think I got them for like $30. So it's not a big deal. I'm not paying $80 or $100 to get a straight arm that's in good unbroken condition. Now this guy came in good unbroken condition, but even with his swivel, I can't get his bazooka to line up right on that side. Maybe I could get it on the other side, but I'm not going to play too many games with this because it is a challenge to not break thumbs on these guys. So that's a challenge. Now, let's take a look at this figure. He does have a helmet that sort of matches his green. Not exactly matching it, but they only had lighter and dark green. So the one that's the closest is what matches. You do have a backpack on him, which is kind of cool. I believe I have it on correctly. I might actually have it on upside down. Let's see here how it looks this direction. And yes, following the curvature, I did have it upside down. Cool looking backpack and cool looking figure. He does have brighter green here that almost matches the helmet a little bit. It's almost neon green, like rapid fire, to tell you the truth. So the pretty cool looking figure overall. I do think that this one does stand out, and his paint apps on him look striking. Zap is one that's riddled and plagued with breakage issues, but if you get a good looking one, don't snap the fingers and enjoy them. All right, next up we have Short Fuse, and this is pretty cool that we have a figure stand for them. I do want to point out that if you're going to use figure stands on these figures, make sure that you test the stand on maybe a separate figure that would maybe wear the edges on the stand, that maybe a junker figure that you don't care what happens to it. But here he is holding his mortar and mortar launcher, and that's kind of cool. And that you can put him in a pose like this is how I posed him on the shelf, which adds a little bit of dynamic look to the shelf. And it looks pretty cool. Here is the back of him, his backpack. He does have a pretty cool backpack. Matches the color scheme on him. He is a darker one. So he does have, well, he should have, I believe, the darker green. I think I might have a light green helmet on him. Might have to go double check that. But he is pretty cool, but he does share some body parts with other figures, such as Zap and, I think, yeah, him and Zap. Well, looking at him, though, the figure himself looks pretty cool. This is a straight arm. He does have the visor, and the visor is, well, it seems like it's something that would be useful to him. I do want to point out that all these figures with helmets have holes in their helmets, but he's one of the only 4 that have a visor. And his backpack, and he looks pretty good. This one's actually in pretty good shape. This is a pretty common figure overall. His accessory does have a bipod that is easily lost, and the one that they included in the accessory pack for the following year is gray. So that's not very great if you're wanting a complete figure, and it looks really silly with a gray bipod on there, but it's an option if you need an option. But pretty cool looking figure, one of the easier ones. Short Fuse. And Short Fuse is actually, I think, one of the only ones I don't have an actual swivel arm to. Alright, here we go with Stalker. And Stalker is what I think of when I think of a military figure. But it's kind of interesting that they reuse parts for him. He is made up of reused parts. It's got a new head. But the camo on him makes it look like he's almost a completely different figure. And I have actually had to, I probably didn't tighten the screw very much because I did replace his arm. I broke his thumb. I was really sad about broken thumb Stalker for so long. But he is pretty cool. This is the straight arm version, and I do prefer his swivel arm so much more. But I will point out, this is his original gun. His gun is actually one that's also available in the weapons pack, and that is pretty cool. The weapons pack one on his, it doesn't look much different. It's very, very, very similar. But his is probably one of the easiest guns to get. I'm not sure why. And then, of course, they reused it in down the road in other figures. But Stalker is pretty cool. He's a Green Beret, and kind of breaks up just the bland, monotone military with the camo. And like I've said before, this is what I think of when I think of military from the 80s. This is just how I remember it. But that's Stalker, and a pretty good face sculpt, and we see him several more times in several iterations in the next 12 years. Next up is Snake Eyes, and I want to say this one is my least favorite version of Snake Eyes. As a kid, I had every single version, but the lack of paint kind of put me off to it, and I wanted to see him in a visor. But it's still really cool, and I have the straight arm one. The rubber band failed on my straight arm one, but it is in my childhood storage, and with that, I might restore all those one day. I did a video about those, but I didn't restore them, and I am very, very concerned about this. I might break this on camera. He wasn't holding his gun right now. I do have one of each gun in his hand, because I do want to show the difference. We have the standard gun that he came with, and then we have the weapons pack version. So you can kind of see the color variation, the color difference on these. And I might actually have the weapon packs ammo pack. I do think I might have that, and I might have to go through all those again. But recently I got serious about getting these completed and more complete with the correct colors, and I'm starting to see the light on that. But when it comes to paint apps, I do like this 1998 version a whole lot more, and it's not very expensive to pick one of these up. We're talking a fraction of the cost of picking up the original, and I do like it more. In my display, I predominantly just display him in the display because I think it just looks that much better. But what they could have done with more paint apps. The 1998 one is not an exact replication. It is a facsimile. It is similar yet different. But this Snake Eyes is epic, and everybody loves this one most, except me. Now we're going to get into the vehicle drivers, and as we get into the vehicle drivers, we will discuss their vehicles at the same time. Well, this isn't exactly a vehicle, but it's the way that they do these things. And this is Grand Slam. I think he looks pretty cool, kind of like Flash. He's got the same body type, body armor things that's going on with him, but it got a different head and different paint apps. He's got the black gloves and black boots instead of brown, and he doesn't have the backpack with a blowtorch, but they do share having this visor. But how does he work with the jump? Well, I do keep the silver version of him on the jump, because I have him on there for the display, and I'm not really having any fun removing accessories. I will have to show it off on the silver version. Now, the silver version is harder to get, and he only came in the swivel arm, but we will talk about that next year or next week. Here's his backpack, and this hose connects from the backpack into a hole here, the jetpack, to this gun right here. And whatever this kind of gun is, there's a sight on this gun. It connects to the arm, sort of. And I don't have it connected on there very well. And I don't want to break any of it. So that's just the way it is, the way it's connected. And I am really concerned. In fact, I'm so concerned about this silver guy that I haven't changed his band out, because I don't want to break him. Now, this jump, and I have an extra backpack on there, that's just how I display them too. This is very simplistic, but it is kind of fun. For a low price point, you were able to get something for them to jetpack from, and you could store the jetpack parts when your figures aren't doing the jump. Let's take this up just a little bit. Now on the back here, we have this piece here that clips on, and generally I have seen a lot of these that break at the clips, and that makes a lot of sense. That would be the weak point or the stress point, these clips right here where it clips on. Now this is just the charging pack for the backpack. Now, showing this jetpack, this is a science fiction element of G.I. Joe. This is not realism of G.I. Joe. So the very first year, they started with some sci-fi elements. If you got to think about the enemy Cobra, that's science fiction also. But Yep, there's Grand Slam and the jump, and we'll see it again. Next up, we have Steeler and the Mobat. And looking at this Steeler, I do not have a straight arm version of Steeler. So now, out of all of the figures, this is the one that I would say would command a premium. And boy, howdy does he. When you can generally pick a Steeler up for under 30 bucks, mostly complete, then the straight arm one pushes 100. That's a big price variation. But as you can see, he severely discolors on his lower arm and the joint. So we're looking at 3 different colors on the arms. And it's not just one. It's almost every one that I see have that strange, severe discoloration on Steeler. And you don't get that on the straight arm version. So that is one aspect of the straight arm version that makes the straight arm version better. So in this case only, you'd have an advantage by picking up a straight arm. But anyway, getting into the Steeler figure, he does come packed with the classic Uzi, and he does have this visor on. I'm sure it's for distance so that he could like find out, hey, oh wow, they're 100 meters away. Let's fire on Cobra. Now he did get packed in with the Mobat tank. Now the Mobat is motorized tank, and it is kind of cool. I remember when my brother first got it, it was quite an exciting event, and well, for one night. But I always had that question, why is it not radio controlled? We're in the modern age. It was the 80s, and why is it not radio controlled? Now let's see what it does. It goes forward, sideways. As you turn this, it disengages one and engages the other so that it can do a turn. But you have to constantly be controlling this, or you let it run one direction. Now it will go backwards faster than it goes forward. And I was doing a little bit of looking into this, and it's because the motor part is in these gears. So it's a lot more to pull all of this rather than to pull just this to go backward. So it does go backwards faster, especially noticeable when you're looking at low batteries. But there it is, Steeler and the Mobat. This little piece here usually is lost, and this cannon piece here can shoot. It does come with a little black sticker that goes on right here for kind of a sensor and a sight. So it's a very realistic tank, except for the fact that no tank that I know of has a spot for you to control it by hanging out the top. It's supposed to be a hatch, but they made some liberties, or took some liberties with this, and this is the Mobat. Next up, we have Hawk, and he's packed with the MMS missile launching system. And I've got to say that I didn't know that this was Hawk. I just thought, well, I don't know this guy's name. I forgot his name. What is his name? He's not Steeler, is he? No, he's not Steeler. It's Hawk. So we'll get into the rest of Hawk later, but he does share parts with other figures, but painted silver, and does kind of stand out. He has the same head as, I believe, Short Fuse. And I'm really not going to get into all the body parts that are shared because I don't remember off the top of my head, but it's pretty easy to kind of spot them as you're looking through, wishing that, oh man, I wish that part was the right color and matched up properly. But standard figure, he does have the, is he a swivel arm? No, he's a straight arm. He is a straight arm. And this is another one I think I don't have a swivel arm to. And with that, it's kind of strange that I don't have a swivel arm to that figure. Now, the MMS system is one that I really am not a big fan of. I think I had it as a kid, or my brother had it, because I just remember these missiles. But this one is broken, and it has a couple of break points, and I can feel it just putting it together. I've had it in a container for the last 4 years, in a tub, and I pulled it out to put it together, and I was just really disappointed in how fragile it feels. Now, these aren't very expensive. They're pretty cheap, and I could replace it, but I'm going to put it back in a tub, so why would I bother spending money to replace it? There's 3 missiles that clip onto the side, and I do have a breakage point right here, but this seems to be the breakage point, one of the breakage points, the other breakage points where the missiles connect, and probably other breakage points on top of that. And let's pull a missile off, and this is what a missile looks like if it's not broken. I think I have a broken tab there. It's just a very, very delicate kind of toy, which is crazy, but it's just not surprising. It's in the first year, and they were trying to figure things out. This is the controls that Hawk would use, and it does have the stand. It can connect to the back of anything with a hook, which is kind of cool. And then this stand here can be moved up. Oh, there we go. There, I wanted to showcase my breakage to you. It was holding on okay until just then when it did its transformation. This has nothing to do with the fact that they rolled out Transformers 2 years later, the transformation process. Most people know Hawk as Hawk version 2, and so this really is version 2, but he wasn't a general here, but he's a general there. But 2024 brought Hawk a new name. Hawk version 2 is now codenamed Hawk Tua. Next up we have Clutch and the Vamp, and this is a figure that the Clutch actually looks a little bit cooler, but he comes with little to no accessories because he's the driver. He's a packed in figure, and they just wanted to pack a figure in, and that's kind of what they did. Now, looking at him, he does have some brown on him, and I don't think that he shares his chest with any of them, but he does get a recolor down the road, which is part of the reason why that he probably doesn't share the chest with anyone. They wanted to get the mold out by making them tan later. So we'll see that next year, the tan version, or you can see it in the video I made last week. This figure is another spare Clutch that I have in here. I don't know. It's just, does he have? Yeah, he doesn't even have broken thumbs. That's cool. Now, I did get this Vamp from my buddy. It came, all these vehicles I'm showing here came in my friend Philip's collection. This is his childhood stuff, and I'm not getting rid of any of it. I'm keeping it, whether I like it or not. It's kind of cool. He did lose his steering wheel. I think the steering wheel for this one, I'll have to look it up, but I think it's one that has the two side pieces as a round, instead of a round wheel, but I will look that up. It does come with these huge kind of Humvee kind of tires on this. This is it's not a Jeep, but it is Jeep-like, and it does come with this double gun cannon on the back, and it swivels around, which is kind of cool. It does have the gas cans on there on the back. I believe I have that right, but he broke his hook, so he put his dad probably put this 1980s metal hook on there, so you can actually hook it to the MMS and all that kind of stuff. But kind of cool. I'm actually shocked it's in as good a condition it was, because he played the heck out of these things. But there it is. There is Clutch and the Vamp. Hey, Classified has a Vamp now. Next up, when Cobra is attacking, you're going to give them some flack. Don't give me any flack about the jokes. But this is the flak, and this is a gun, and it's a giant cannon that they can sit on. It's kind of cool, and it looks okay. They're not very expensive. I just looked them up. You can get them complete for probably $30 on eBay. I see parts all of the time, but this one, I am really impressed that this one he kept in such good condition. Probably because there's not a lot of play value to it. It would just kind of sit there and just be an addition to your collection. But I want to showcase something. You see the broken thumb we have on this spare grunt I have over here, and it really works for putting him on here. But the fact that it has an opening so you could just kind of fold the figure's hands over it works also. But then the broken thumbs, I just don't have to worry that I'm going to break his thumb on this. And I think that's kind of cool. But yeah, it won't hold on as well. It does have some cool stickers and decals and stuff that's going on right here for some computer stuff. And really interesting. Now I want to take I guess I can leave them on there. This folds up for storage. And I'm not exactly sure if there's anything else we can do with it when it's folded up. But it folds out and it stands. But I'm sure it folds up so that you can store it away in your toy box a little easier. But it also folds up so that they can fall off. But there is the flak. Don't give me any flack about this gun. The funny thing is I didn't even realize till I started making this video that I don't have a vintage Ram. This is a modern one. Now, everything else in his collection is vintage. But he had a modern Ram in there that he picked up somewhere along the way. And I guess that's because something happened to his Ram, and that's all that was left of his Ram. You can see the difference, the color, and all that kind of stuff. Now, I'm not searching out vehicles anymore. I'm really just going after figures and completing the entire figure line. But I have a lot of vehicles. But with this, I will just show a picture. So you can see a picture of a vintage Ram. And the cycle is pretty cool. It's iconic. And it's still one you can get for a reasonable price. They made it cheap and affordable. And it was everywhere. Everybody had a Ram, it seemed like, so getting a vintage one's not too hard. I wouldn't cost me very much, but I don't display the Ram. So with that, it's a cool vehicle, it's a cool motorcycle, and you can get one in Classified. Now for the two things that I don't have, the HAL is kind of like the flak, but kind of a combination between the flak and the dual cannon that we'll see next year or next week. And with that, I guess he didn't have one, so I don't have one. I didn't chase it down, and it doesn't really look to be like it's something that's that spectacular, but it's one of those elements of building a display, world building, and at least it was there as an option. It probably was a very low selling item. I didn't even look up prices on it, but I gotta say that I don't think it's that highly sought after. The next thing I don't have is some little something called a Missile Command Headquarters. Now, it's made out of cardboard, so it probably didn't hold up very well. It was also, I believe, a Sears exclusive. It is an exclusive, and I think it looks pretty interesting and pretty cool overall. I would love to have one, and I know they did like a reissue of it, a remake. Someone somewhere made a remake. Maybe it was a custom, or it was an STCC exclusive or JoeCon exclusive or something like that, but there was an exclusive remake of it, and even that one fetches a hefty price nowadays. But that's the Mobile Missile Command. All right, so I normally do all the figures, then I do the vehicles, then I do the play sets in that order, and I might do that going forward, but since everything was Joe and we have just 3 bad guys to go up against, all of that arsenal is against these 3 guys. And I've got to say, they're actually in the show kind of wimpy overall, that they really, you're going to have to troop build the heck out of these to have an army against G.I. Joe. But these are great looking figures. They knocked it out of the ballpark in 1982, the very first year. Now, granted that they are straight arms at first, so this is the officer. Now, I don't have one with good paint that's a straight arm, but you do have all the problems with kind of breakage on crotches and all that kind of stuff. So people do pay a premium to get a straight arm of these troopers. But I'm also seeing people paying a premium just to get a trooper that is in average, decent condition like this. And with that, all right, so this is all I was able to find over the last, let's say, 4 years that are in a reasonable price point for troopers. And for that, a reasonable price point is like 25 or less. But this is what I think we're going to get from Super 7 when it comes. I think this is going to be the coloration. This is a black major, and he was like a $20 figure. But the coloration is more like the cartoon, and I think that's what we're going to get. And I put him next to Cobra Commander. Now, Cobra Commander is awesome, and I love his color. I love everything about him. But I didn't have him as a kid until later on when I tracked him down at a garage sale when I was almost done with the toy line and all toys in general. And it was one of those things that was the white whale or the blue whale to pick him up. Now I do have an extra gun on his back just to showcase that it holds a gun and he can hold it in his hand, and that was scary getting that bad boy in there. I do like his lighter blue. He is lighter than his troopers that he commands, and he has a nice Cobra symbol on him, and he has a painted face shield. And this is a really a good figure overall. Stands the test of time. He was considered a mail-in for the first year, and then I believe he was packed on a card back the next year. I believe that's how it went, but then I wasn't even collecting those at the time. But look at the color matchup. Would you want your troopers to all look like Cobra Commander, or do you prefer the original darker blue, which I think most collectors say they like the darker blue? One minor yet extremely important point I must make, and I have some of these with the wrong weapons because I don't have the correct number of weapons. So the trooper himself comes with this gun with kind of the open kind of stock there, and this one here has an AK-47 on the officer. So that's the correct guns, and I don't have all the correct ones on the correct figures because I don't have the right number to match up, but they're all holding something, and I figure might as well set the record straight here and now. All right, so I really hope you enjoyed this first video of many videos in a series covering the entire G.I. Joe line, but 1982 is where it began. It's where it all started. It did seem a bit simplistic, and that's the good part of the year. But anyway, we're going to talk about this, and we're going to talk about all of the other years going forward, but I'm curious what you think in the comments below. Like and subscribe. Tidy Your Hanger out.
Where's the doc?
Cobra's got him, and they're heading for the river.
Hurry, the Joes are coming! Come!